only way to eat is be violent. It's not the sickness that's scary, it's all the people who whiling. The government lying, they trying to keep us calm through the sirens. You know it's for real. And all the pharmaceutical giants don't have the cure that they can.
My name is Alex Gilles, and I'm a member of the INT Madison, the International Marxist Tendency. And today we have a very important event, a very interesting topic. It's about the COVID vaccine and the need for the socialized program, for the socialist healthcare system, global, that it can give us all what we need to get out of this nightmare of this pandemic. My job is today to be the host, introduce the topic and our speaker, and also talk a little bit about our organization. The INT, the International Marxist Tendency, is a revolutionary organization that works within the youth and the workers' movements to support or foster a socialist program, a program where all the workers, all humanity, barely, we can be together, fight for a better society and get us out of this straitjacket of capitalism and finally explore the potential that we have as a humanity instead of the endless horror that we have under capitalism. You can learn more about us in our websites. Our international website is Marxist.com. Our organization is present in more than 40 countries with sections in more than 80, with contributors, editors, and articles that help us to get news and analysis of events happening in the working class and the class struggle all over the world. In those 40 countries, when we have a section, we work actively on the unions and the labor movement and the youth, defending these ideas and trying to build a new society. You also can learn about our US section here in the United States in socialistrevolution.org, or you can learn about our local Madison branch on Facebook on facebook.com/INT Madison, or our local website intmadison.org. We have many avenues to contact with us. You can also email us to madison@socialistrevolution.org. But the more important thing for us is to foster the ideas, the Marxist analysis, the theory behind these revolutionary actions that are needed to change society. We firmly believe that the ideas of Engels, Marx, Lenin, and Trotsky, to say a few, can help us to analyze what's going on today and how to transform. And you know, if you are interested about these ideas, the work that we do, you can always contact us and join our movement, the socialist movement. You can also deepen into the study of these ideas by going to our online store, marxistbook.com, or also obviously with many of our articles in our newspaper, Socialist Revolution, and our website that I already mentioned. Today, we are introducing a very important topic, as I said before, about the healthcare. It's a year now that we're living a nightmare that is affecting hundreds of millions all over the world, millions of deaths, millions of cases, millions of unemployed. Meanwhile, the richest, the 1% or the 0.01%, is getting more and more money. Just here in our zip code, during Faulkner of Epic, very much doubled her fortune during the pandemic, which it rivalized obviously with the conditions that many workers have in Dane County, especially in the hospitality sector and campus, and many other industries have to shut down because of the COVID-19. It's our firm convincement, our idea, our understanding that most of the effects of the pandemic could have been avoided and mitigated very quickly if we will have a planned economy and a democratic control of many of the assets that exist, but we don't have access to them. And that's why when we heard about the vaccine, we thought, well, finally we can get out of this nightmare. But obviously, in the hands of capitalists, this becomes in its opposite. This hope becomes really into a nightmare. To talk about all these things, we have today Yvonne Gertz. Is a long-time organizer and activist in the Madison area. She has been worked very hard in many fronts, to name some of them, in the immigrant rights movement, tenants' rights movement, labor movement. She herself an alumni of the UW Madison campus, and more importantly, a leader of our movement, of our branch of the INT. And she is going to lead us off with important information and analysis on how to evaluate what's going on today around the vaccine and the problematic of COVID-19. I would say to finalize a little bit my wrap up that after this lead off, we will have a discussion on Zoom. This discussion won't be live stream, as opposite as what we see right now. We are currently live streaming on Facebook and also in our YouTube channel in IT Madison. We will post that Zoom at the end of the event, after the introduction of our camera Yvonne, and it's free for everybody to get into and continue to discuss these ideas, exchange views, and keep sharpening the tools of analysis, and also build for a change of this society. At this point, I think I touch all the things in my checklist as a host of what I have to tell the public, and we are ready to hand it out to Yvonne. So without further ado, Yvonne is all yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, so much for that really kind introduction and welcome. I want to start by just giving a warm welcome to all of you who decided to spend a couple hours with us this cold, at least if you're in Wisconsin, Thursday evening. I think that this, as Alex said, this topic is really important for a lot of reasons, and I think has been on the forefront of everyone's minds for quite a long time, and for a lot of reasons. The COVID-19 pandemic has really impacted all of our lives in a lot of really fundamentally big ways, financially, emotionally, and psychologically, physically, just to name a few. And the number of lives that have been lost to the pandemic, is not something that you can really put a price tag on. And the statistics themselves are so staggering that I think sometimes it can be a little overwhelming or nearly impossible to really wrap your head around, the magnitude of that loss and what it means. And to anyone who's lost a loved one due to sort of the bungling and inept, handling both of the pandemic as well as the vaccine rollout, I think even more so, there's no way. I think it's pretty indescribable to think about, what that grief must be like. Just today, it was reported by a research institute housed at Harvard University, not a Marxist organization by any means, right? That 40% of the deaths related to COVID-19 in the United States could have actually been prevented. And while some might say like, oh, that's liberal academia just taking pot shots at the former president and his policies, I think one of the things, if you look at the study more deeply, one of the things that the study points out, in addition to criticizing, the initial rollout and the initial response to the pandemic, was also the fact that it had to acknowledge that the United States entered the pandemic with a completely degraded public health infrastructure, and that's something that had been the case for decades, right? The U.S. currently spends half of what the UK or Canada spend on their healthcare systems. And cuts to the healthcare system and healthcare infrastructure in the United States have fallen quite a lot. They fell quite a lot just from 2002 to 2019. And in addition, the U.S., one of the richest, if not the richest country on the planet, has also led the world in recorded COVID-19 deaths. And just behind us is India, right, which has a completely different economy, completely different challenges. You have one that's an advanced capitalist country and one that, for lack of a better word, often is lumped in as being one of the underdeveloped countries. So not only was the response in the United States and worldwide by the capitalist class to the COVID-19 pandemic completely bungled, but so has, as I mentioned earlier, the response by the capitalist countries, the capitalist governments to the vaccination rollout. Despite the U.S. government claiming that it would have 20 million people vaccinated by the end of last year, the CDC reported that only 4.2 million people had been vaccinated. And, the question is sort of like, why, right? And part of that explanation is due directly to sort of the irrationality of capitalist production, which created all of these gaps in the supply chain, which were also exacerbated, of course, by the pandemic itself. Companies like Pfizer and Moderna, they've already sold way more doses or contractually sold and taken in the income of way more doses than they can currently supply, of course, guaranteeing for themselves huge profits up front. But in order to meet those commitments, they've had to strike all kinds of deals with other companies in order to do so. And all of these sort of commodities in that supply chain are owned also by the private sector, which of course is expecting to be reimbursed. So in short, again, nothing I think surprising for those of you who are joining us tonight. Private interests and a lack of central coordination is one of the key sort of things that's really holding up the rollout. But I think beyond gaps in the supply chain and a lack of coordination and problems as well that you will have read about in the news regarding distribution. Beyond that, there's even, I think, a bigger picture that we need to talk about. And that is that the two biggest barriers to advancements in medical research are, and have been, perhaps unsurprisingly, the same two main barriers to the development of the economy under capitalism today. And those are the nation state, the existence of the nation state, as well as the private ownership of the means of production. So while the virus itself would be considered a product of a combination of factors, including climate change, poverty, and definitely reckless production practices, its rapid spread was the result of governments that refused to suspend production immediately upon recognizing what they had on their hands, as well as medical services that were ill-equipped after decades of cuts in spending, as I mentioned earlier, and lack of investment. And that lack of a coordinated global response was due to competition between the nation states, right? You may remember, for example, last year when former US President Trump tried to buy the exclusive rights to vaccine research that was being developed in Germany, which also led to the German government providing a counteroffer, which, in one way could have also led to a bidding war. But these kinds of protectionist measures, right? The U.S. first, like, we'll get our vaccine and then, screw you and maybe worry about you later. Really, one is at odds completely with the globalized world within which we live, right? But also that jealous, guarding and concealing of the results of research, both privately and publicly held, is one aspect of what we're talking about when we talk about the nation state being really this barrier to the development of the productive forces and to the progress of humanity. It's no secret when we talk about the pharmaceutical industry that the majority of pharmaceutical research and development is privately funded. In the United States, the last numbers, I believe from 2018, were that 67% of research and development was funded by private interests, 22% by federal bodies, and just 8% directly funded by academia. And often, this high cost to research and development is used and has been used to sort of justify, increases in drug prices, even of older and generic drugs, right? And that's even though the majority of new medications are actually produced by state-funded and subsidized research. Yet what happens is that most of the big pharmaceutical companies who have a stranglehold on the raw materials use all of their money and all of their clout in securing patents on these drugs, on these vaccines, which were developed using public money, in order to what they say called flog derivatives, right? Rather than actually advancing medical research. For Moderna, although Moderna, one of the recent developers of a vaccine that has been approved, agreed not to enforce its patents, but also has refused to share its research, right? And I think one of the things to recognize is that if all of those resources could have been pooled, I think it's for sure something could have been come up with a lot sooner. Now we know, and we've heard said that vaccines are difficult, they're expensive, they're time consuming it's a time consuming process, all of that research and development. And the returns are not guaranteed, right? So some would argue that, like, well, there's these big pharmaceutical companies and they're taking these big risks, right? So they should be able to just charge for that. But actually, as industry insiders have commented, including one notably, Trevor Jones from the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry, they've noted that although the average new drug costs about $500 million in research and development, that money is typically earned back just in the first 3 to 5 years. And so that contradiction of, their ability not only and their practice and their history of earning back their money very, very quickly, has been corroborated by magazines like Forbes. Again, not a Marxist publication, that has already pointed out this contradiction, right? That while the numbers of new drugs and vaccinations have been trending downward, pharmaceutical profits have been trending upward, right? And the explanation for that is, of course, that it's a lot of easy money coming in to develop or to gouge drugs that already exist that we know people need. Insulin is a really good example, and one that was in the news not too long ago. The guy that bought the Wu-Tang Clan CD was the head of a pharmaceutical company, and you all might remember Martin something, that he got gained a lot of notoriety for increasing the price of an important HIV drug, right? This is the kind of stuff that they're doing. So they make money hand over fist with very little incentive, a lot of time because of the risk, to spend a lot of that money actually researching new vaccinations and new drugs. And I think this is the context within which we want to talk about the need for socialized healthcare and the need for socialism, right? And the need for you, all of you paying attention and listening to us today, and hopefully joining us afterwards in the discussion to get involved and to help build those forces of Marxism. Now, it is true that attempts have been made in the past to build up sort of state-run medical research and development, because a lot of people would say, like, okay, I get that there's problems in the way things are run right now, and big corporations, maybe they shouldn't have so much power, but convince me that the alternative is socialism. Convince me that we can't just tweak things around the margins here and there and fix these problems. And one thing I would point to is that there have been a ton of attempts in the past, and I won't give an exhaustive list, but perhaps during the discussion there's several articles that I'm happy to share. But there's been, as I was saying, several attempts to set up state-run or government-run medical research and development. But even that currently only makes up about 5% of total spending in the United States, while military spending makes up something like 54%. And all that power that big pharma, as it's called, that is concentrated in the hands of big pharma, means that it dictates to the government, not the other way around, right? Government does not dictate to capital, but capital dictates to government. And a good historical example would be sort of the last time that there was a national, what we would call a national vaccination program, which would be a good example with 1976 against the swine flu. And that experience, what that told us, and what we learned from that is, the big four drug firms, they refused to sell the government 100 million doses of the vaccine until they were guaranteed full liability indemnity for anything that might go wrong, as well as a guaranteed profit. This is when people's lives are on the line, right? And this example from the late 70s is but one of the laundry list of examples of the tools that are in the toolbox, right, of the private pharmaceutical corporations in order to control, the access to very basic necessary life-saving vaccinations and drugs for the majority of the planet. So the spread of the pandemic, just like the crisis of capitalism itself, I would say, also served to highlight just how interconnected, how global the world truly is. Everyone has been affected by this pandemic. And it shows us that similarly, the solution must be a global one, not one that's limited just to a single country or even just a handful of advanced capitalist countries. This is not about whether or not we in the US can go back to brunch by the summer, which is not a given anyway. And those of you that are joining us, I'm sure you're not thinking necessarily that way. But of course, the hope is there, right? Like, we've been through so much. A lot of folks are so exhausted. And so it's natural. It's only natural that people want to imagine that this was a pause button, that they could, resume their normal lives as quickly as possible. People just want to see their parents and hug their family and friends and breathe the same air without worrying about, causing somebody to get sick. But it's important to note, I think that again, it's not just about us, that this is, as I was saying earlier, a global problem. And I think the practice of vaccine hoarding, for example, by the governments of rich Western countries, is also something that we as Marxists really want to put out there, right? Is to take the lens, right, from just the local, but also expand it that 30,000 feet to the global. Because when we talk about the crisis of capitalism, we're talking about the future of humanity. And so looking at how this is affecting other parts of the world is important to touch on. And effectively, that vaccine hoarding has effectively put the vaccine out of reach for billions of people for the foreseeable future. Not to mention just all of the other problems, like we say, in supply and in distribution. And, let's take into account that the World Bank, while it has offered kindly to provide aid for vaccine delivery to developing countries, it's done so in the form of loans. And we know what World Bank loans means for the developing world. It means increasing their debt. It means more austerity. It means that, and this has already been proven, tons and tons of countries that are indebted to the countries that make up the World Bank, have for decades and decades implemented cuts to exactly that thing that would have helped avoid the worst effects of the pandemic, namely healthcare, in favor of making payments to IMF and World Bank loans that are likely never going to be repaid. And interestingly enough, after more recent, in the last several years, cuts to the World Health Organization, it's the World Bank that has become the biggest funder of public health globally. And if that isn't the biggest irony, I don't think I could come up with a bigger one. The fact is, friends, poverty kills. And not just over there in places that we've never maybe been, but here too. While the UN predicts that 265 million people worldwide are under the threat of starvation, and that's up from 149 million before the pandemic. And so while 2.36 million people dead worldwide from the coronavirus, from the COVID-19, is jaw-dropping, and as I was talking about earlier, sometimes difficult to really wrap your head around those statistics, it's nothing compared to the staggering numbers of people who die every single day from things as preventable as starvation. And in the United States, when we talk about healthcare and when we talk about poverty, we recognize that oppressed communities are hit even harder still, right? The ability to receive medical care in the United States is directly related often to your financial status. There are tens of millions of service industry workers, gig economy workers, warehouse pickers, factory workers, delivery drivers who cannot have the chance to work from home. And those are people in the lowest paying jobs that have the least quality and most expensive healthcare. And so it's no surprise that they're more susceptible to, not biologically, but just because of their very real lived material conditions, more susceptible to not only contracting coronavirus, but also dying from COVID-19. And at the same time, we see, as Alex pointed out during his introduction, to that the richest 1%, just during the course of this pandemic, have increased their wealth by exponentially, sort of just mind-bogglingly much, right? While unemployment in the United States has risen from 4% about before the pandemic to something like 10%. And you can bet that while the majority of us may be waiting quite a while for access to a vaccine, the stories of celebrities and royalty, I think the Queen in England, I think she already got her vaccine, right? The stories abound of royalty and celebrities accessing the vaccine before even all of our frontline workers and first responders have had an opportunity to access it. So really, all of this is to say, this is the context within which we live today. This is these are our lives. And seeing the absurdity of capitalist production, the disgusting power of the large pharmaceutical companies, we recognize and we put forward to you that it's under and only under a rationally planned economy that we would be able to pool the planet's resources to combat, like I said, this absurdity. It's no doubt that modern medicine and advances in science have, at least in the advanced capitalist countries, doubled, for example, our life expectancy and improved quality of life. And yet, imagine what we could do if all of the research from all of the universities and all of those companies and all of those corporations and pharmaceutical companies that were in a race to develop the first vaccine for profit actually had put all of their resources, all of their knowledge together. How much more quickly might we have seen a vaccine? If we could put together all of that ingenuity in humanity toward developing not only necessary vaccines, but carrying out things like, mass immunization programs, I think we would have had a very different outcome. And it's really the devastation of the coronavirus pandemic is a product of capitalism. There's no way around it. That's a system that puts profit over the lives of people. Only the working class and a workers' government armed with a revolutionary socialist program can put an end to this nightmare. And so I invite you, we need your help in building the forces of Marxism and the forces of the IMT in the United States. So we hope that you'll join us and check us out, like Alex said, on our websites, sending us emails, joining us, finding us on Facebook. And we hope, and I hope that after this, that you pop over onto Zoom and join us for the discussion. I think that that's where we can really learn a lot from each other and enrich this discussion even more. Hopefully this introduction whet your appetite a little bit for the discussion and got your brain thinking about questions you have or points that you'd like to raise. And so without further ado, I'll end it there and look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Yvonne, for that wonderful presentation. At this moment, we are posting the link of, so here we have a good way to support our work by donating by Venmo to IBY Gertz, which is actually our comrade Yvonne, who's our finance secretary, among other hats in our branch. We are posting the link of the discussion. We will ask you to join us and continue this conversation that is so important. I think Comrade Yvonne have touched many of the aspects of the vaccine and the crisis that we're living in, and sometimes it's easy to be numb from all this information, all this calamity, the inability to do something about it, really, other than to see these politicians and corporations deciding the fate of humanity. But however, when we stop and we can see really what are the assets that we already have collected, right, by the labor of millions of workers all over the planet, it's clearly that there is hope and there is a way forward, but obviously not in the hands of these corrupt, greedy capitalists that they're just sustaining a system that is in crisis and it's impossible to provide any progress. So we invite everybody to join us to this Zoom. We already are having some cameras there, so you are more than welcome to join us. Remember that we have a next event is going to be on February 25th about evictions with our comrade Andrew. Also, you can visit our website. You have all the information over there, so I won't spell everyone because it's quite a bit, but it is very easy to find us. And we always enjoy to have a coffee or a virtual coffee with anybody around the area of Madison, Wisconsin, and surrounds, and continue this discussion. We think changing the system is possible, but only if most of the working class and the youth learn the ideas, learn to defy the status quo and put in front of this reality better program, a better plan to move forward. And for us, that is socialism, is the Marxist ideas, and we love to discuss it every day. So I think with that, we are going to let the live stream on for a while, couple minutes. We have the link over there. Again, if you want to contact us, you can go to our website, intmadison.org, our local Facebook, or you can email us to madison@socialistrevolution.org. More importantly, if you want to learn more about us and talk with us, use this opportunity, go to the Zoom discussion, and see you at the other side of this. Thank you, and thank you for watching.